our man here, Keith, is an expert or is knowledgeable about the whole game globally. But specifically, I just wanted to ask you, Keith, to start off with the Pacific Championships so far. It's in its third year. Do you think it's been a success, and where do you see it going in the future? The Pac Champs.
Yeah, I think it's been a big success, and I think it's still growing. I'll be very blunt with this. I think the organisation needs to be taken off the New Zealand Rugby League in terms of the promotion and marketing of it. Even in New Zealand, I think they just don't have the expertise or the budget, and the ARLC do have the budget for it. But what we don't see is behind the scenes, the Australian government's funding a lot of this as well. Particularly, the Fiji, the Pacific Bowl, we call it, the Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and the Cook Islands side of things. So this is a financially viable product, but I don't think people care that much about that. The product that's on field took a big leap in this year just gone compared to that first year. Even though, for Kiwi fans, that is fantastic to see them thrash the Aussies in Hamilton there. And the fact that Australia is touring England opens up the door for Matama Tonga, Taua Samoa, and the New Zealand Kiwis to all play in the one series. And I struggle to recall that might be the most passionate series in rugby league history. That'll rival State of Origin in terms of the ferocity in my mind, if not surpass it. So I think it's been a big success. Longer term, I think you'll see Papua New Guinea with 15 odd million people and genuine pathways being built start to really challenge those three nations that I just mentioned, and even in Australia. You've got 15 million people where rugby league's its national sport. You need to study rugby league at school. That's how crazy it is. And they just need the pathways. So they're a rugby league nation where they're going to have an NRL team, and they're not relying on a diaspora. They have the population to be able to develop genuine pathways of their own. But yeah, the upcoming series with Samoa, Tonga, and New Zealand is going to whet many people's appetites, including mine. It is. I've got goosebumps just talking about it right now.
So are you saying that even this specific Pacific Champions coming up, the ARLC should take the lead in promoting this one, even though their focus is on the Ashes? Would you say that?
Well, I don't think their focus is on the Ashes. I think that's Rugby League Commercial, which is the commercial wing of the RFL in England. And more pertinently, Simon Moran, who's the owner of Warrington and the most successful music promoter in England. He's behind the Oasis reunion, what was the Spice Girls reunion. So he's given them he's told them how to sell tickets. There's a strategy behind naming Headingley as the local sort of like Yorkshire one. It only holds about 20,000 tops. And that's sold out before the general sale even went on sale. And then why don't you name a stadium that's still in the north, but it's got a bit of novelty about it because we haven't played a Super League grand final there or anything like that, or a Magic round there. And that's Everton's new stadium. So the novelty of that new stadium alone created there was only 1,500 tickets left by the time the general sale to the public actually went on sale. And that was snapped up straight away. So that's 52,000 sold out already. Wow. And what that does is it filters demand down into the only game left, which is the opener at Wembley Stadium. Now, they haven't reported how many tickets they've sold. Reportedly, it's a little over 20,000, but there's a long way to this series. Wow. And they haven't started promoting that series in London to the Australian expats yet because there is an announcement coming up. No one really knows exactly what it is. It's to do with the London Broncos, and it's been moved back to May, and it's at the Australian Embassy in London. So they want to time. They don't want to start promoting the Wembley game to the Aussie expats in London until they actually let us know what that what's happening with the London Broncos. What's the Australian involvement? Why is this being launched at the Australian Embassy? So I don't know. You guys make of that what you want. But that will be they've already sold the last Ashes series is 2003, and this series. Despite the tickets only being on sale for the last couple of weeks, has already sold more tickets than the attendance for that series in 2003. This is the shot in the arm that the game needs. I was talking to Phil Kaplan from 4020 Magazine last week on the podcast, and he was saying it's not just that. It's the fact that it's on BBC at 2:30 in the afternoon, and that is going to get people knowing which players, like the superstars that we have in the game. Yes, the Super League is broke. No one's denying that. NRL does need to buy the Super League or get involved somehow to rescue it. But what Phil Kaplan said was that people always say, people used to know the household names like Martin Afire back in the day. That's because Rugby League Internationals, England versus Australia, was on the BBC at 2:00 in the afternoon. That's how Martin Afire got known as a household name outside of the north of England. So this is a throwback to that kind of heyday where rugby league could actually penetrate the general market outside of the M62 corridor up north. So you can't underestimate what the Ashes series means to the game in England. Unfortunately, the RLPA got in the way of playing a game against France. They play so many games.
They always do, these guys. I swear.
Yeah.
Man. I just want to quick. Ash, you got any questions for Keith in the international space? I'll keep going.
I definitely I love to hear, as obviously growing up, Australia versus but even just a test back in the day of like Australia versus Great Britain. When I was growing up as a little boy, it was just a major thing that I used to love getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Over here in Australia, watching Darren Lockyer and Willie Mason, all those boys get to work, and there used to be real good like competitive tests in some aspects of it as well. It'd be good to see us go back over to England in an area that at the moment, like rugby league, like they're a side that when you go over and play them on their own turf, they can hold up a fight, right? And obviously there's a lot of talk around the refereeing and all that sort of stuff over there, but I'm just excited to see this Ashes test and see it bring back that old school feel of like the Australian tours and going back over there and try to, especially when the International Rugby League of the Pacific Championships, they're stepping up in their level. Like Toa Samoa, if all the rumours are correct with Payne Haas and maybe Tino and the Hammers already pledging and stuff, like that's going to be incredible to see how that plays out. If the Pacific Championship goes bang over there here, and then obviously the Australia versus England lifts that audience there too. I think it's just incredible for the international game, and I think we all agree here. Like for rugby league to continue to grow, in my opinion, it has to be international. It's something that I've incredibly missed when I was growing up as a boy, and it's good to see that it's finally taking precedent at the moment. It's finding its way back into rugby league as fans.
Yeah, the other two things that I want to touch on, just because I know we're pressed for time, is that I think it's ridiculous that Victor Radley can't play for New South Wales. The guy was born and raised here. You're only really disadvantaging the Kiwis, and you're asking people to forego $90,000 a year, and apparently what will rise in terms of the match payments for State of Origin to play for $5,000 per test for the Kiwis. So it's not just... You're basically, I wouldn't say bribing them, but like it's not fair that they're put in that position where you're foregoing the best part of $100,000. And the fact that, if Jerome Luai can play for New South Wales and Samoa, then surely Kieran Foran could play for New South Wales and the Kiwis. I just think it's really unfair for the Kiwis in particular because it happens more often to them and it needs to change. And the second thing I want to touch on, sorry, you go, Levon.
I got a question for you. My vibe that I get, even listening to Gallen and all that, there's still a pride in the Kangaroos jersey. They don't want to let go of that control of the game because, in essence, 13 World Cup wins, all the records in the world. There's still a lot of people that don't want to let go of that traditional sense of origin is that piece that leads to that Kangaroo selection. Like, I know there's a portion still fighting hard for that. But there's the benefit of, opening the game up that you have origin players that can benefit the Kiwis because they know the levels and that can then benefit the international game. Why do you think that? Is it because of that history of the Kangaroos that people are still holding on to, like not letting the England or the Kiwis get a bit of those players? You know what I mean?
Maybe. I actually think that some of them, despite it's going to sound ridiculous given the role they play, don't understand that we're not asking for the age 13 where you play your junior football and reside in that state to be abolished. We're not saying Sam Burgess could have played for New South Wales or James Graham, for example, or Sean Johnson for Queensland. We're not saying that. We're saying that if you fulfill the criteria of having played your junior football in that state prior to that age, then you should be played. The floodgates have opened, whether people like Paul Gallen like it or not. And if you want to prevent tier 2 representatives from playing state of origin, then you're just going to kill international rugby league. Because the reality is that we've only got 2 professional competitions for rugby league in the world. If Australia hoards all the talent like it was in the past, then you're just going to regress to what international rugby league was 15 years ago. This is a golden opportunity. Rugby union built the respect of their World Cup after 1987 on small islands like Tonga and Samoa being competitive. And then in that time, nations like Ireland started to get more and more competitive. So we just need the teams that can be competitive at a World Cup level to be there for as long as possible, whilst the game is developed in rugby league playing nations that have a decent population, so they can actually create their own pathways. And last week, the IRL identified Wales, France, and Papua New Guinea as those 3 countries where they're going to give disproportionate amount of funding to, because they see them as having a big enough population and rugby league being, even in a small amount, in the psyche of the public there. So I think, that's just my opinion.
That's great. That's great to see.
On that point, though, too, like, if like, obviously, we think about, all these the players that play for heritage, because I completely agree with your point. I believe that, like, international stage should be for your heritage or where you want to represent your heritage, and your state of origin is really where you grew up and played junior footy growing up. And I think you love Queensland as much as, like, the next guy, if you grew up from 13 playing onwards. It doesn't have to be about your race or about your your heritage overall, like, to play origin and be like, if Jason Tamalolo was like, if he was born here in Australia, right, and he was playing, through Queensland and that, like, why should we hold him back from, like, representing his parents of being Tongan heritage or, New Zealand heritage, and obviously play for Queensland. And what that also does is hearing a lot of talking about, not bringing into the political discussions of Australia or anything like that, but obviously a lot of talk about, was it Dean Witters that bringing up that he wants to make a Indigenous Australian side? It's like, but if we take away, right, the obviously not take away, but if those, like, Samoan heritage players, stuff like that, Polynesian heritage players goes and they want to represent their heritage as well, because they're just as Australian as me overall. At the end of the day, they were born here, but they want to represent their heritage. Like, the Indigenous players end up getting better at that. Like, they get better positions in that sort of aspect as well, right? Like, you get more opportunity for our Australian squad to be, in that sort of aspect as well. So really, at the end of the day, because I don't agree with that whole separating Australia in my sort of sense, because everyone, I believe, is Australian, but you got the Indigenous Australian as well. But that gives more opportunities for Indigenous Australians.
Really well, yeah.
He did.
We do a good job with the All Stars to celebrate those cultures and Indigenous round. And the reality is that Samoa and Tonga are independent countries, and our Indigenous population here in Australia is a wonderful part of the people, of the wider people that that make up our great nation. We are all Australians, so we all really represent Australia, if I can word that delicately.